Welcome everyone, and thank you to those joining us live and to those listening in afterwards. I would also like to warmly welcome our guests today, whom I will shortly introduce. Our webinar today is titled Advancing Sustainable Respiratory Care, Next Generation Propellants in Inhalers. And this digital event will explore the introduction of pressurized metered dose inhalers, or pMDIs, using next-generation propellants with near zero global warming potential. And these innovations preserve proven efficacy and patient familiarity while significantly reducing environmental impact. So by bringing together leading respiratory experts, this session will highlight environmental, clinical, and practical considerations for pharmacists. Participants will also gain insight into the importance of maintaining people-centered care during this transition while also supporting health systems' sustainability goals. Next slide, please. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lars-Åke Söderlund, and I had the honor and pleasure of moderating this event today. I just finished my term as one of the FIP's vice presidents, and I'm also chair of the FIP Technology Advisory Group. On a daily basis, I work as an executive advisor for Apoteket, a government-owned pharmacy chain in Sweden. As you can see on this slide, we have some announcements. Please note that this event will be recorded, live streamed on FIP YouTube, and the recording will be available at events.fip.org. To all those listening, please feel free to send your questions through the Q&A box provided, and I will do the best to manage all the questions so that we at the end we will have or be able to address all these questions. And you're also, of course, very welcome to provide feedback to webinars at fip.org. And I would also like to take this opportunity to promote the benefits of a membership within FIP, including events and webinars. FIP is the global body representing over 4 million pharmacists and pharmaceutical scientists. So if you are a pharmacist or a pharmaceutical scientist and you would like to become a member, please register on FIP's website at fip.org. We now have a new feature in Zoom. You can actually get translations to your own language. You do like this: turn on captions, enable the translation toggle, choose your preferred language under My Caption Language, and now you can actually follow along with live translated captions. Next slide, please. For today's event, we are joined by a panel of fabulous speakers, and I want to sincerely thank each of them for taking the time to prepare their presentations. And with us today are Emma Paulino. Today she's a panelist, and Emma is the president for the National Pharmacy Association in Portugal. We have Rajyot Sagu, lead pharmacist and medicine and respiratory expert within the National Health System in England, UK. We have Anna Grenha, Associate Professor at the University of Galway in Portugal, and Job van Boven, Associate Professor, University of Groningen in the Netherlands. Welcome all of you. It's indeed a great honor to having you with us today. Next slide, please. And here we have today's program. Our invited speakers will cover the following topics: environmental and sustainability considerations in respiratory care, next generation propellants, innovation in pressurized metered dose inhalers, and pharmacists' role in supporting pressurized metered dose inhalers, use and adherence. And at the end, we will have a Q&A session and a panel discussion with all the speakers and with Emma Paulino as a panelist. Emma is a team member of the Inhaled Respiratory Medicine Innovation Environmental Sustainability Group. So welcome, Emma, as a panelist as well. Next slide, please. There are a number of learning objectives for this webinar. You will learn about to describe the environmental benefits of transitioning to pressurized metered dose inhalers with next generation near zero global warming potential propellants. Recognize the broader role of pharmacists in advancing sustainable respiratory care. Explain the role of pressurized metered dose inhalers in respiratory care and why next generation propellants are needed. And of course, discuss the clinical continuity for patients, including efficacy, safety, and inhaler use. And to identify communication strategies to reassure that the patients actually know and are aware about this change. So now it is my great honor to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Ravjot Sagoo. Ravjot is a pharmacist with over 25 years experience and respiratory specialism across primary, secondary, and tertiary care. She was Chief Pharmaceutical Officer's Clinical Fellow at the NHS in England and is also an honorary clinical lecturer. She is chair of the Clinical Pharmacy Association Respiratory Committee and has been part of national and global working groups to develop guidelines and frameworks. She sits on a range of national committees, including the Sustainability Board, Respiratory Clinical Reference Group, with various publications and research undertakings. She is a quality improvement practitioner and coach, and also NICE prescribing associate and council member advocating for patients. She has an interest in population health and is passionate about inclusive care, sustainable, personalized, and holistic for patients to improve outcomes and reduce health inequalities. Ravjot is also chair of the Clinical Pharmacy Association Respiratory Group in UK. Welcome, Ravjot, to give us your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I've got a bad throat, so apologies in advance if I cough. But it's great to have so many of you here today. So I will be talking about the environmental and sustainability considerations in respiratory care. This is the session outline, and I will go straight into it. So you will be aware that we have a climate crisis, but actually that climate crisis is a health crisis, and we are all in it together. Now, there's no one country that is spared. This affects all of us as health staff, as care staff in social care settings, patients, and just citizens of the global community that we are. So there are many people who think this is a conspiracy, it's not really happening, but actually, whether you believe it or not, the global warming and changes that are happening are affecting everything. So that's affecting all life species, the different ecosystems and food chain, and this is everybody's issue, so it's broader than just health. So you will be aware, and this shows us that we are expecting that if we can try and curb our global warming by not more than 1.5 degrees, that we will be able to sustain our life and not get things too bad and start the El Nino cycles. However, our projections are showing that actually that 1.5 degree rise is going to be reached a lot sooner than expected as well. So within the next 4 or 5 years, which is quite dangerous. This quite nicely shows us that you've got a number of different actions that you could take. So we could just rely on policy alone. We could have particular targets in place or pledges. But if you did one or the other, all of them put together, actually best case scenarios that we are still going to be exceeding that 1.5 degree Paris Agreement that has been put in place. So actually, we're in a bit of an urgent situation here. So this is climate action is required by everybody. So just to give a little bit of context, and many of you will know this, that climate change impacts human health all round, not just for respiratory, but those who are more vulnerable, such as with cardiopulmonary disease, are more vulnerable and will be impacted more so, and also people from disadvantaged backgrounds and communities as well. We know, as I've mentioned, that the different food chains and species are affected. So we're getting different diseases, more waterborne. We're getting different ground level particulates, so PM2.5, ozone, etc. And when there are forest fires and changes in the temperature and the climate, that is then causing particles to travel hundreds of miles. So even if you're in a community very far away in the same country, you could still be affected by fires and the different particulates. So with particulate matter PM2.5, there is no safe level of that. And so it's important that we try and look at our overall global air pollution as well. And some of that is contributed to by biomass fuels. And we know the burning of those, especially in some of our Asian countries, for example, that can also bring on diseases like COPD. So there's a link there. So as I've been saying, you've got the wider determinants of health. So some of those are the social determinants as well. and then your commercial ones. So we have a dependence on things that are nice to have, such as the cars, and our diets are different. They're less, they're more processed. They're less of the vegetables and varied as they should be. We've got the effect of tobacco, etc. But also all of the wider social determinants of health will then affect the wider cycle of health as well, as you can see here, and that increases the use of healthcare. I just want to give you an example from the NHS in England. So this carbon net zero report came out in 2020, and it had identified that there are various contributors to the carbon footprint within the National Health Service. And within that, that was the medicines that had a large part of that, so up to 25%. And with that, we could see that anesthetic gases and metered-dose inhalers, so the gases within them, had a large impact. So it might seem like, okay, that's only 4 or 5%. However, there's quite a large volume of prescribing, so it was having a big impact. So just to give you a bit of an example of what the pMDIs, what they mean in terms of the gases, excuse me. The metered-dose inhalers, they contain the medicine, but obviously they need a propellant gas to enable the drug to come out. Now, these gases, they stay in the atmosphere for a very long time. So if you see here on the side here, some of the gases that I've mentioned, the longer greenhouse gases, you've got water vapor, which can last for not very long, days, for example. But then you've got burning of fossil fuels, you've got nitric oxide, and so on. And each of these, as we progress down this list, they last for hundreds of years. So the halocarbons, such as the fluorinated gases, these are the ones that are inside the inhalers. And they can last hundreds to thousands of years within the Earth's atmosphere. Now, what that does is wrap around the Earth and cause a blanket and that global warming effect. And so that is dangerous. Now, we know that if we move from using more metered-dose inhalers to dry powder inhalers, there's less of a carbon footprint. Now, carbon is not the only relevant factor, but it is something that we can quantify and measure. And so that's why you'll hear people talking about carbon footprint within healthcare as well. Now, one of the things that came out of the net zero report and the NHS in 2020 was to move more towards having dry powder inhalers where clinically appropriate for patients, but also to look at recycling, because actually your inhalers, they will contain gas even after they've finished the drug. And so that can then leach out into the environment as well. Equally, we want dry powders to be disposed of appropriately, and they contain mixed plastic. So it's not always easy to recycle them as well. So our advice here in the UK is make sure for patients, they are all returning any inhaler that they've got back to pharmacies for correct disposal. Now, just to speak to this infographic here, so the carbon footprint from Ventolin brand MDI is quite large if you compare that to the equal DPI of the same, so salbutamol there. Now, some people say, well, actually, this is not a very good comparison. You're showing a driving journey and driving as a choice, and that is correct, but this is just one way of trying to put context and show you the massive difference. So if patients were able to switch away from a metered-dose inhaler to a dry powder inhaler, we're already having a bit of a quick win there and reducing the carbon footprint. Another infographic here, which quite nicely shows the impact of an asthma exacerbation on the environment. So you can see that the patients become unwell. They'll be using their short-acting beta agonists. They will have a journey to their doctor or go to hospital, and they have all the various treatments throughout that journey and the electricity that's required and so on. So all of that has an extra carbon footprint. So actually, wouldn't it be better to keep our patients well, which is what we're striving to do, so that they don't create this extra carbon? Excuse me. Okay, so this is also a nice table to show you some of that carbon impact of healthcare as well. So we have an estimated, there's a document here that estimates this for us here within England. And if you were going to the GP, so your general practitioner, you've got a 66 kilo carbon emission there. Whereas if the patient is more unwell and need to go to hospital, it's 125, so it's almost double. So really, it's better for patients not to have to go to hospital unnecessarily. So we want to keep them well. And in the UK, we have a policy shift as well to make sure that patients are being treated care closer to home, which is obviously better for them. But we want them to stay well and be better. So this table, it might be a little blurry for you, but just to explain, this is from the Sherlock study. So this was a retrospective study in the UK of over 22,000 patients, and they were categorized by exacerbation exposure. Now, greenhouse gases or the carbon dioxide equivalent is linked with healthcare utilization. And so the SABA prescriptions and this utilization was estimated for 3 years of follow-up. Now, we know that exacerbation history is linked with an increased likelihood and rate of future exacerbations. And so the environmental implications of this haven't been quantified. And so long story short, do look it up, this study, the reference is here at the bottom, but that history of severe or multiple COPD exacerbations increases the carbon footprint and of future COPD related healthcare resource utilization and SABA prescribing. And that's by 50% for each year of follow-up. So this is quite an important paper. So I just want to draw your attention to this, which is quite a nice model from our Centre for Sustainable Health here in the UK, which has these 4 principles. So if we try and translate this to respiratory care, but just general care for patients as well, and I can sort of put on the different advice and initiatives here, you can see that there's a lot that we can do, which is all round going to be better for patients. So it's not just about having a leaner service, that's going to be better, that's going to be more efficient, we're going to have less use of the MDIs, and we've got circular economy principles that we're thinking about, and it's thinking about health all round, so very much that holistic approach. And then if we think about the direct impacts, but also the indirect impacts of lung disease, so we know that there's impact of inhalers, etc., on the environment, but also it's the other way around, it's the lung disease. And as I've already alluded, that increased health resource utilization will then generate an extra carbon footprint. So we have medical waste, and some of that will be the obvious things, the inhalers, then the nebulizers, but then also we've got plastic, we've got different packaging as well. We've got energy and electricity, so other chemical emissions and waste that can come through that, and is ultimately a strain on healthcare services. That some of that is around the different scopes as well. So some of that might be water, it might be transport as well. And additionally, it's thinking about the air quality feedback and the feedback loop, so smoking and pollution. And I also want to remind us that we've got the UN and World Health Organization Sustainability Development Goals as well. So the UK, just like other countries, they are tracked on their progress on this as well. So having better air quality, both indoor and outdoor, is going to be better for our health overall. We know that there's a link with dementia, for example, and cancers and so on. And this is another infographic that I quite like because it captures that there are many co-benefits. And I think when you're potentially talking to people who don't quite understand what the sustainability environmental agenda is about, it is more than just health. It's thinking about everything that we do, which I alluded to the social determinants of health as well. So people are living in cold, damp houses or where there's less energy efficiency, that's also potentially bad for them in terms of them getting asthma, exacerbations and allergic reactions and so on. And as I said, with the global warming, that is going to increase the ground level of ozone, of other different particles, which are more likely to make people exacerbate as well. So thinking about what we can do in terms of as a society, as individuals ourselves, but also our patients as well. We want them to try to be more active. That's going to be good for their own physical health. Consider how they travel as well. So if they are having travel, using active travel options such as cycling, thinking about the diet that they have, the packaging, the plastics and so on. So there's a number of co-benefits. So actually sustainable health is good for both the patients and the environment as well. So I always talk about holistic care, and patient-centered care is what we're aiming for. So we don't want to, so whilst we've had that report and many other recommendations that have come out from Carbon Net Zero in 2020, we don't want to just switch inhalers and this is being done to patients. We want to engage patients. And so it's important that patients are part of the conversation. And there may be a financial incentive to switch to a slightly cheaper product. But actually, what is that in terms of return on investment further down the line? Is the patient going to be destabilized and then need to have an admission to hospital or see their GP, etc.? So not a false economy, but thinking short-term return on investment versus long-term, and not just in terms of the cost financially, but also the carbon impact and other costs as well. So I won't read all of these out, and hopefully you can read them. But essentially, one of the things that we want to do within respiratory is reduce inappropriate SABA reliance, because there is an over-reliance. We've had a change to our national asthma guidelines recently at the end of last year. So hopefully that is going to be moving us away and to appropriate therapy so that patients are on the right therapies. We're improving their adherence. And also we are involving those patients, that shared decision-making conversation, so that they understand the risks and they're choosing what works for them, but we're also matching the inhaler to what their ability is. And hopefully for most people, they have a really fast inspiratory effort, and that isn't actually always suited and matching an MDI, so it's better suited to a dry powder, for example. So we want to reduce inappropriate prescribing and cascade prescribing, so the overall polypharmacy agenda and the waste that's associated with that as well, but adherence and making sure people understand why they're doing things. So if they're engaged and they understand and they're part of that conversation and change, they're more likely to help drive it as well. So that brings me to the end, and hopefully that's given you a flavour. I know my colleagues will be talking a little bit more about the adherence and the different propellants as well, but sustainability needs to be business as usual. And whilst I've spoken about respiratory, we have the other parts of it to think about. So quality improvement projects, which will allow our services to be more streamlined and efficient. So that might be in terms of, for example, just changing your internet browser at work. So that's we've moved to Ecosia for a lot of our hospital trusts here. That's a lower carbon footprint. We have lights that will only be activated if you get up, so with motion, so that lights are not being left on, power saving mode. Every little bit helps. So it's starting to move away from a more passive approach to a more proactive. And also we want to activate our patients so that they are interested, not just in disease management, but in health all round. So I think we have a lot of opportunities, and that will allow us to have more streamlined care. Obviously, we have different payer setups in terms of how the healthcare is accessed in the different countries across the world. But overall, better controlled lung disease is going to be better for the patient and for planetary health. And hopefully you've had a flavour of that through my talk. So I just wanted to point you to some nice resources that we have that are, some are international, some are from the UK. So we have our British Thoracic Society position statement. We've also produced a pharmacy guide as well to help pharmacies, whether you're a hospital or community, to become a bit greener. We've got the Lancet countdown report, so I think that's due out imminently. And then we've got a really nice greener practice QI document here, which has been a lift and shift. So we've done the hard work for you, put together a toolkit which allows you to look at your prescribing in primary care and make that more streamlined and higher quality for asthma care as well. So that's a nice resource. But essentially just there's co-benefits. Please discuss those with your patients, and hopefully you've taken away something useful that you can apply. But I will take more questions at the end, and I just wanted to acknowledge my colleague Dr. LJ Smith as well for some of the slides. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Raviot, for this very clear introduction to today's topic. It is clear that many different factors affect healthcare and people with respiratory diseases, and also, of course, the environment. And the car comparison, I think, was very clear to show the context and also the impact of lung diseases to the environment. Thank you so very much. It is now my great honor to introduce the second speaker, Anna Grenha. Anna Grenha has a PhD and a habilitation in pharmaceutical technology. She is an associate professor of the pharmaceutical technology in the University of Algarve in Portugal and leads the drug delivery laboratory. Her research focuses on respiratory drug delivery, particularly on the development of inhalable dry powders. And the research group is also keen on exploring the potential of natural materials, fostering new applications that benefit from their intrinsic properties. Anna was a project lead of several funded projects and authored around 55 papers in international peer-reviewed journals, 6 book chapters and 2 patents in the field of drug inhalation. She was awarded the prize Investigator of the University of Algarve in 2022 and the Robalo Cordeiro Award from the Portuguese Society of Pneumology, attributed to scientific projects on pulmonary immunization strategies. Welcome, Anna, to give us your presentation.
Well, good morning to everyone, or good afternoon. I know it depends a lot on where we are, and I know we are a lot of people. So I would like to start by thanking the organization for inviting me to be with all of you here today. And it is my very first time in this FIP digital event, and I'm very honored with the invitation. I also apologize for my voice. I have a bit of cough today, so hopefully with my water, I will be able to do all the presentation without any problem. Well, actually, I was invited to talk on the next generation of propellants. It's the propellants are in the MDIs, as we understood from the previous talk, and you know that this topic is quite nice to me because since ever in my career, I've been working on the development of lung formulation, although with a focus on DPIs, as Lars greatly said in my introduction. So I think that we all know that the propellants are the driving force in the MDIs so that we can have the aerosolization of the drug. So they are very, very necessary. And we have a very strong concern on these propellants nowadays. So, you know that since we had the MDIs in the market, which came to the market in the 50s already, a lot of time ago, at that time, we had as propellants the CFCs, the chlorofluorocarbons, that were identified to have a lot of ozone depleting effect, a quite strong effect in this way. And so, because of the strong sorry, I was not finding the key to go ahead with the slide. So because of this identification of the ozone depleting effect, it was defined with the signing of the Protocol of Montreal in 1987 that we need to phase out to end the use of the CFCs. I think that we all are very aware of that. The pharmaceutical industry obviously had to adapt to that new reality. And at that time, back in the 80s and the 90s, there was a strong effort from the pharmaceutical laboratories to find some other propellants that could be used and that could, keep us with the number of medicines to control asthma and COPD that were so very well controlled with using the MDIs. So at that time, another type of gases, what we call the second generation of propellants, the hydrofluoroalkanes, HFAs, I will say only HFAs from now on. So HFAs were identified as the best substances for this end, and they were replaced in the MDIs. Actually, at that time, it was basically a reformulation to put in the market new formulations that were using HFAs instead of CFCs. And after screening a lot of substances, of possible substances, we came out with 2 substances that are mostly used, HFA 134A, which is definitely the most used in the currently marketed MDIs, and also a portion of the MDIs have HFA 227EA, around 10 to 15%, I believe. So if we look at the timeline of MDI evolution, we had a phase out of the first generation of propellants, the CFC, which was mandated by the Protocol of Montreal in 1987. And in 1995, we had the first formulation being marketed of MDIs, which was based on an HFA. So as I said, we had two substances at that time. And actually, what happened is that since then, although these new propellants, new at that time, so the HFAs, were not having the ozone depleting effect that was observed in the CFCs, we have been finding out that they still be greenhouse gases. So they really contribute to global warming. And we all know that this is a transversal worldwide problem. So we realized with the years that we needed to also address this problem. So obviously, the countries, USA and European Union, we all have set some regulation, introducing some quotes and deadlines to decrease the use of these HFAs, because they are contributing to the global warming issue. So apart from that, the European Union set the regulation on these gases, the said fluorinated gases, of which HFAs are part. It was in 2014. So in 2015, we already had that implemented. And in 2016, there was an amendment to the Protocol of Montreal, the Kigali Amendment, which made a decision on the phase down of these gases, of several gases including these HFAs. And it was defined that the phase down of the gases should start in 2019. So we have now a new switch to come. We are switching the propellants once again, so it's not new. That's one of the messages I wanted to give you. And we need now to replace the second generation of propellants, the HFAs, by others, which have a lower contribution to the global warming issue. So once again, after screening a lot of substances, we came out with two main substances, HFA 152A and also HFO 1234ZE. They all have very weird names, but it is what it is. So these two are what we call the next generation of propellants, which are the focus of our talk today. What I want, I was going ahead, but want to say something before. So a study says that switching these propellants now in a period of 10 years from now will allow us to reduce the total emissions of gases with global warming potential in 89%, which is quite important. So I wanted to let you know and to make this very clear that the switch, it is being imposed now by the regulation. And also the switch that we had before between CFCs and HFAs is not related to the safety or the efficacy of the MDIs. Instead, it comes from data-driven and very sound environmental concerns related with global warming. So as we see in the table, and it was also already mentioned in the previous presentation, if you compare the global warming potential of the current HFAs with the ones to come, the 152A and the 1234ZE, you see that with the new propellants, the third generation of propellants, we have in fact a much lower contribution to global warming. And that is, in fact, what we want. If you see another part of the table I issued for you, we can see that comparing with HFA 134A, which is the most commonly used, we can have a decrease in the impact on global warming between 100 and 1,000 times, which is very impactful and relevant. So the European Union also revised the regulation of the F-gases again into 2024. And what can we expect from the actual regulation that is on the table? A complete phase out of these gases, the HFAs, is expected by 2050, but we will have strong reductions up to 2030, which is quite in the next corner. It's right there. And this, pay attention to this, it includes the phase down of HFA 152A. So we are now talking about a new propellant, a next generation propellant that in fact is already expected to be phased down very soon. Apart from that, what can we expect from the new formulations that are coming that include the new propellants? What is the impact of these new propellants? So propellants, as I said before, are the driving force of the aerosolization. We managed to have droplets of our formulations. MDIs are liquids and they have suspensions or solutions of our APIs. So what we have after we actuate the device is the formation of a droplet. And the size of that droplet and the evaporation rate of that droplet is clearly affected by the propellant that is being used. Apart from that, the propellants also impact on the plume that is formed. And the velocity of the plume and the geometry of the plume are also very important parameters. They will affect what portion of the drug we will be able to inhale. So all these factors as a whole may impact the efficacy of the formulation. That's why we need to study so well the new formulations having the new propellants. But everything is being made so that patients can still be controlled with their new medication. So if we see, again, the timeline of MDI evolution, I have something very important to tell you about. It was already in this year, into 2025, in July, when the MDA, the EMA approved the first reformulation of an MDI, now containing a propellant, a new propellant, a propellant of this said next generation, which has a lower global warming potential. In this case, it is a formulation combining three drugs, which is formulated with HFO 1234ZE, which is the propellants having the lower impact. I also wanted to give you a hint on the inhalers market and what is expected on its evolution. As you can see in this graphic, we are expected to have an increase on the use of and the marketing of DPIs on the light blue, but we also expect an increase in the market of MDIs. So we really need to take care of these because there is a lot of people worldwide using these inhalers. The graphic that I show now, and it is on the right side, was made by myself, collecting data from some sources, different sources. I should say that the data are not really consensual every time, but it is clear that while in the United States, for instance, we have quite an unbalanced consumption of the different inhalers with a prevalence of the MDIs. Around 70% of the inhalers are MDIs. In Europe, we have a more balanced scenario, but I should say that we have strong differences between the countries. If you go to UK, for instance, you have around 70% of the prescribed inhalers corresponding to MDIs. But if you go to Scandinavian countries like Sweden or Denmark, you have the opposite. You have much more DPIs being used. So what is in fact the relevance of this switch? The great users of MDIs are people affected with asthma and COPD mainly, and you can see in the numbers that it goes by between 4 and 10% of the population, depending on the zone, and in which is quite a lot. 5 to 10% of the population is quite a great number of people using or being possibly using these inhalers. And in Europe, a study says, again, the data are not always consensual. Sometimes I see 75 or 80%, but around 90% of the total carbon dioxide equivalent emissions from inhalers are coming from MDIs. So in fact, there is a contribution, an important contribution, even if we know from other studies that emissions from MDIs total less than 0.1% of the total emission of greenhouse gases. So we need to think really on this data and to make the best decisions based on this. And I come to my conclusion. So I would like to say that, in fact, we need to focus on the control of the patients. The patients need to have their disease well controlled. That is the most important objective. Many patients have their disease controlled with MDIs. We obviously need to pay attention to global warming issues because it's affecting all of us. But we also need to look at the evidence of what we have. The new propellants, particularly the HFO-1234ze, is practically carbon neutral. So is it mandatory that patients, in fact, go from an MDI to a DPI to make this contribution? Or can we rely on the use of these lower global warming potential propellants? So DPIs, as well as MDIs, also have a carbon footprint. The proper devices from cradle to grave, and we need to address the question that was already mentioned in the previous presentation. What about device disposal? That needs to be clearly and evidently addressed. Why do we not recycle? Can we not make a strategy that enables us to recycle these devices and therefore decrease their impact in the environment? And in the end, we also need, connected with the first point I mentioned, the need to have our patients with a controlled disease. Patients that do not have a controlled disease are more prone to exacerbations. And those are the ones that make us increase hospital admissions. And in that cases, yes, in fact, we saw clearly in the previous presentation that we have a massive contribution to global warming. So that's all. I hope I have awakened or raised your questions and your thoughts. It will be very interesting in the final discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Anna, for highlighting these MDIs and DPIs. It was very interesting, and I agree with you. Patients who don't have a controlled disease are most likely to contribute to new hospital readmissions. And I think it's very, very important also when linked to your slide about the inhalers market, that shows clearly how the environmental changes actually affects healthcare and people around the world. So thank you so very much. It is now my honor to introduce our third speaker today, Dr. Job van Boven from the Netherlands. Job is a pharmacist and associate professor at the University Medical Center of Groningen, Netherlands. And he has previously been the chair of the Dutch Respiratory Pharmacist Group. He has published over 140 papers on respiratory drug use and leads an academic research group of 10 PhD students. So welcome, Job, to give us your presentation.
Thank you very much, Lars, for the kind introduction, and a pleasure to speak here for such a large audience of pharmacists all around the world. So this talk will be about what can you do as a pharmacist in supporting patients using their pressurized meter dose inhalers, making sure they use it correctly and with a good adherence to therapy in order for them to reach the optimal therapeutic benefit. So what topics will I discuss? I will start with some background on how we can support patients with inhaler technique and adherence. We'll talk a little bit about communication strategies. What are the important messages, but also how you could monitor patient outcomes and difficulties in device usage. And last but not least, especially taking a global perspective here, we talk about equitable access to inhalers all around the world. So this is the good news to start with, and we already heard some introduction about the new propellants being developed. And actually in July of this year, last summer, the first reformulation of an inhaled medicine with a novel environmentally friendly gas was approved by the European Medicines Agency. And this is, of course, very good news because these developments are going much faster than the previous change from the CFC. So this third generation gas has now become available in one of the medicines so far. And that's important. It's just one medicine at the moment. Other triple therapies, but also other inhaled medicines in pMDIs still need to be replaced and are awaiting approval from the regulators. Another important aspect is that still we see a lot of patients having problems with the right inhaler technique and with adherence to their inhalers. This requires ongoing attention from healthcare professionals, including and maybe especially pharmacists. We heard before also we should have more efforts in stimulating recycling of inhalers. We may try to combine inhalers where possible, because obviously if you use 3 inhalers where you could have like a triple therapy in one inhaler, this has less environmental impact, which is still the same therapeutic benefits. And we should look at access and affordability of inhalers around the world. So let's first look a little bit to the basics. So how can we decide what is a good inhaler? But just to go back, and this is a summary of the previous talk as well, what was the current footprint of the currently used inhalers? That's there on the left. So the HFA 134A in the number of kilograms of CO2 equivalents versus the DPI. So at the moment, this is about a 10-fold difference. However, with the next generation ones that are here in purple, they actually are in the same range of dry powder inhalers. So both the HFA 152A and HFA 1234ZE are in the same range as the dry powder inhalers. This is, of course, very good news. What's also important, and these are very important messages that you as pharmacists can send once they are approved by the regulators. This is based on equal therapeutic benefits. So the drugs in there are not changed. They do exactly the same. The good thing about being able to use the pMDI for patients, they don't need an active switch to a dry powder inhaler for environmental reasons, because switching has risks as such, because a dry powder inhaler has difficulties for use for several patients. It's a completely different way of handling the device. You need to generate a forceful inhalation technique, while the pMDIs require a more quiet inhalation with less forceful technique. So basically, pMDIs are, everybody can use them, including children, elderly, those with acute exacerbations, and dry powder inhalants can also be used by a large share of people, but not by these people, not by children that cannot generate the inspiratory flow required to get the drug out of the inhaler, for example. The same if you are in panic with an exacerbation, you cannot use the dry powder inhaler typically, and patients and elderly that also cannot generate the sufficient flow. So when you don't switch to a different type of device with a new propellant, you don't need to provide additional training, because it's exactly the same way of using the device. And in this way, the burden goes from the patient to the industry, who simply has to replace the propellant, and the patient is actually not noticing that they have a different device at all. It's just a propellant that has been updated, basically. Communication will, however, be key. Patients will be asking maybe if it looks a little bit different. I think it's important that we have to check ourselves as pharmacists if there's maybe a different taste or not. Maybe we can have some placebo devices in the pharmacy to practice a little bit and see if it's different or not. It's good to have a very clear message. So what does the guideline actually tell us? How should we select an optimal inhaler for our patients? And the first thing is not the inhaler, it's maybe the class of the medication. Do they need a bronchodilator? Do they need an inhaled corticosteroid? And this is the clinical need first. But then we have to check in our country which of these medications have inhalers available, which ones are available based on local access, reimbursement maybe, cost for the patient. Because if it's a device that the patient cannot use or has to pay for maybe a lot of money, they may not adhere to the medicines, and this may actually bring them into an exacerbation state. Also, you should check if the patients can use them. So can they generate the right technique to use it? And then number 4, also, which of the one has the lowest environmental impact? And again, it's not only about the propellant, it's about the whole life cycle, as we heard. And maybe also, can they be recycled or not? So that's the optimal inhaler. That is the safest and best for the patient, and ideally also for the environment. However, if we look at that number 3, the inhaler technique, we know it's notoriously suboptimal. So over the years, we have been assessing inhaler technique. We have been providing training, and unfortunately, over this span of almost 50 years now, we don't really see a very increase in the way people use their inhalers. Around 30 to 40% only is having a correct inhalation technique. So still there's much to gain from training our patients in better using their devices. Does it matter having a poor inhaler technique? And this is a study in patients with severe COPD performed in Ireland, and they very nicely monitored the inhaler technique as well as the inhalation itself by a digital monitor, so being very objective in what they measured, and they followed up the patient for 1 year. And then after 1 year, they looked into 4 groups, and these are the clusters. Cluster 1 is patients with a good adherence, so they take it every day, twice a day, and with a good technique. Number 2, cluster 2 in green, it's good adherence, however, poor technique. Cluster 3 is in purple, poor adherence, but a good technique. And the worst group in red, cluster 4, poor adherence and a poor technique. And as you can see in the Kaplan-Meier curve, on the y-axis, we have the probability of dying. And on the x-axis, the follow-up of 1 year, you see the red line. This is the cluster of patients with poor adherence and poor technique have the highest probability of dying after 1 year, compared to, for example, the green lines, which have at least half to 1/3 of a risk. And these are the patients with a good adherence and a good technique to their inhalers. So what's the role of pharmacists? And the FIP has a very nice handbook available. It's freely accessible via the website of the FIP. And it's the handbook for pharmacists on chronic respiratory diseases. It's a very nice handbook laying out all the tasks and opportunities the pharmacist has in providing care for patients with chronic respiratory diseases. Some of the tasks that are very nicely described is that pharmacists should educate patients on the correct and appropriate inhaler techniques. They should invest in promoting adherence. They should address and resolve medicine-related problems. They should minimize the occurrence of adverse events and work together in multidisciplinary care teams around the patient. And some of the evidence that's described also in the handbook is coming from this trial. This is maybe one of the largest randomized controlled trials of pharmacist care in patients with COPD, focusing on proper inhaler use. This is called the Pharmacist trial, performed in 170 community pharmacies in Belgium. And it involved a very nice intervention with one-on-one counseling sessions and another one after 1 month of follow-up. It was quite an extensive intervention, as you could see, taking 38 minutes, with a lot of patient-tailored education on the COPD pathophysiology, COPD medication, including the correct dose, the intake time, the inhalation technique training, explanations about adherence and side effects, and also self-management like lifestyle and smoker cessation was addressed. The very good news was with this trial, within 3 months, inhalation technique scores improved with 13%. Also, the adherence improved with around 10%. And even better, there were significantly less hospital admissions, only 9 in the intervention group versus 35 in the control group that didn't receive this pharmacist care. If you then look at the cost calculation, the cost effectiveness of this intervention by pharmacists, you could see around a saving of over 200 euros per year per patient because of the less cost of hospital admissions that were avoided by the pharmaceutical care intervention. Even better now, avoiding hospital admissions will also give a better carbon footprint, because we know hospital admissions generate a lot of carbon emissions. So a patient-centered approach is required when trying to address patients' adherence. And it's not just a patient that is part of the problem of adhering. So of course there's a few, like they can have psychological comorbidities, they can have problems with their self-efficacy, they can have some health beliefs why they don't take it, but it can also be the treatment itself. So the method of administration, maybe the inhaler is not suitable for them. They have a very complex dosing regimen, or they have polypharmacy with taking many drugs at the same time, or suffering from side effects. It can also be ourselves, so the society around the patient. So the patient provider relationship is important. How much trust they have in the healthcare system? Do they have social support from family members or friends and family? And very importantly, do they have the access to the medicines? Is it not too far of a travel, for example? And do they receive the right training? So for each of these problems, different interventions that are laid out here in yellow text are important. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to improve adherence to inhaled medicines. So we try to make this a bit simpler. And one of the things I can really recommend, a very practical tool, is called the TAI. It's the Test of Adherence to Inhalers. It's a validated questionnaire composing of 10 questions for the patient and 2 for the healthcare professional, such as the pharmacist. And it's available in over 20 languages. And it's available from www.taitest.com. In a lot of languages, including English, French, Chinese, Turkish, I believe, Dutch. I don't know. You will see them. Arabic, of course. So there's many languages you can download this one from and use it in your patient groups. What we also developed is a toolkit that actually helps when they have a certain problem. What type of interventions can you provide? We call this kind of behavioral phenotyping. Followed by a tailored intervention. And this is called the TAI Toolkit that we describe in some of our publications. Another way, and this is more the future, and I have to admit, we are the first ones in the world now having worked with this, is called a digital spacer. And this is looks like a regular spacer, but it has some kind of monitoring tool at the back end, where we could actually measure the inhalation technique errors of our patients. In a randomized controlled trial in asthma, we could decrease the number of inhalation errors per day by 26%. We saw this in asthma and also in COPD, where we could even achieve a higher reduction of around 36% reduction in errors. And we also noticed that still patients had a good exposure to the drug formoterol we were giving them by measuring the hair of the patients to confirm a systemic exposure. This was also mentioned, and here's also a very nice study from the UK, how pharmacists can help in recycling inhalers. So this project was run in community pharmacies and hospitals in the Leicester area in the United Kingdom, and they collected over 50,000 inhalers. And by this, they calculated that 305 tons of CO2 equivalents were saved. They worked together also with the pharmaceutical industries in seeing how they could optimally recycle. Especially the pMDIs are much easier to recycle because they only contain single plastics and the aluminium canister. In contrast, dry powder inhalers contain a lot of different types of plastics and are therefore a bit more difficult to recycle and often need to be burned. But the energy that comes from the burning could also be reused. So finally, we talk a lot about making good use of the inhalers, but the prerequisite for this is that you have access to inhalers. And a recent systematic review in the Lancet Global Health looked at 29 studies covering 60 low and middle income countries. And very disappointing, only 6 of the 58 countries met the 80% availability target of availability of SABA, the short-acting beta agonist like salbutamol. For inhaled corticosteroids, it was even worse with 6%. in ICS LABA combinations were not available at all in these studies. Long-acting muscarinic antagonist, 2% only to 13%. So still, why we have the WHO essential medicines list, where we have all these inhaled medicines, beclometasone, budesonide, budesonide plus formoterol, ipratropium, salbutamol, and tiotropium. These are the essential medicines defined by the WHO. In reality, they are not always available. And again, this may also be a task of the pharmacist to advocate for access to essential inhaled medicines. So overall, it's important for pharmacists to inform patients on the environmental friendliness of the novel meter dose inhalers. They should always invest in the education of the right inhaler technique, support adherence where possible, and keep on advocating for availability and affordability of essential inhalers. So we should always try to balance health, cost, and environment when thinking about inhalers. But let us not forget that the health of the patient is the top priority. So that's why in this triangle, health is on top, but it should be balanced with affordability and sustainability. So my take-home messages here is medication non-adherence and poor inhaler technique are highly prevalent and associated with poor clinical and economic outcomes. Pharmacists have a key role in promoting cost-effective and sustainable inhaled medication management. And for effective interventions, patient-centered strategies are required. Digital health tools could support patients' adherence to inhaled medications. So if you want to read more, these are some of the references I used in this presentation. Feel free to access them and use them, and I'm always happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Job, for this, I would say, comprehensive presentation about inhaler techniques, and also showing the positive effect of on the environment with these new inhalers, and also highlighting that the new technology actually will become a valuable resource for improving good adherence among these patients. And I also think that the TAI Toolkit is a great resource that will complement the FRP resources as well. And as you say, personalized digital assisted educating is very important to improve adherence as well. So now I would like all the speakers to turn on your cameras, because it's time for the Q&A session. And I also invite Emma Paulino to join us in this panel discussion. Emma Paulino is a practicing pharmacist at her own community pharmacy in Portugal. And she is a scientific member and also professional coordinator at the ESIFI, a company that engages community pharmacists in the implementation of patient support programs. And Emma is also the president of the National Pharmacy Association, ANF, in Portugal, and a team member of the Inhaled Respiratory Medicine Innovation and Environmental Sustainability Group. So welcome all of you to this panel discussion. And I would like to ask actually Ravjot first a question. How can healthcare professionals positively contribute to the environmental sustainability?
Thank you. So there's a number of ways, and I outlined some of those within my presentation, but it is really about making every contact count with the patient as well. So using the opportunity to give key messages, so such as the disposal of inhalers. So we don't want those inhalers in the domestic waste. And really it's about reframing conversations. So I think the three presentations we've had have really nicely come together to give those consistent messages as well. So I think that health, making it not just about we're doing it for the environment, because people might feel like I'm not interested, but if you make it about their health and about that lung control and the best device for the patient, I think that's helpful. Another thing is really to work out your own carbon footprint as well, because probably we are doing things that we don't realize that we could make small changes. So there are various carbon calculators that healthcare professionals can have a look at and work that out for yourself. So that's a good thing.
Yes, thank you so very much. And that leads me to a question for Anna. Actually, will patients feel that the formulations are different?
Well, actually, the formulation itself, it's a bit different. And when they inhale, the first thing to say is that the efficacy will still be there. But during the inhalation, they might feel something different. In fact, there are some reports saying that it may be a little different. It may be a little easier to actuate the MDI. And it can also happen that the feeling of the spray is a bit different. It can be a bit warmer or even softer. You know that I myself, I never tried such a thing. So I imagine what this can mean. But when we say that it can feel a little warmer, I think that the sensation in the mouth can be a little different. But the most important message to our patients is that the efficacy will still be there. And there is no different technique. So the technique of inhalation is exactly the same.
Very good. Thank you so very much. Job, when and for which drugs do you think that the next generation pMDIs will become available?
Yes, this is a good question. I already showed there's now one that has got EMA approval, and this is a triple therapy. So a combination of an inhaled corticosteroid, long-acting muscarinic antagonist, and a long-acting beta agonist. This one became available, this summer. It was approved, so it's coming available in the next months. We expect some of the others, like a dual LABA-LAMA or LABA-ICS, and also another triple therapy from a different industry, to become available in spring of next year. And also for Ventolin, their replacement is ongoing, and that's also expected a bit later in 26, maybe 27. So it's a little bit of a phased timeline, and these are the innovator companies only. And I think the generic companies will take a bit longer.
Yes, probably, but there seems to be quite a lot of research in this area right now, which is very good, both for patients, our societies, and the environment as well. Emma, you have a lot of experience in this area. What kind of strategies can pharmacies use to reassure patients who are concerned about switching to inhalers with the next generation propellants? What is your view on this?
Thank you, Lars. Thanks, everyone, for the lovely presentations. They were very insightful and informative. So I would like to reiterate what has already been said about every contact counting, and also in reference to your question, as a community pharmacist, I would not wait for people to expose their doubts or their concerns. We should be proactive in approaching all patients that are using these kind of inhalers to be able to convey the messages that have been already shared during this webinar, which is that the next generation propellants have been developed to maintain exactly the same therapeutic efficacy and safety as the traditional inhalers, while reducing environmental impact. So this is the key message. And it's an evolution, not so much as a disruption in terms of the treatment that people are going to have. Also, I believe that demonstrating the use of the new inhaler, however, even if it's very similar to how you use the traditional or the previous one, is always very important. Hands-on demonstration with placebo devices, it helps patients to feel much more confident when using the inhalers, and it is absolutely it is very, very important for good control, as Job has clearly shown in his slides. Whilst saying this, I think it's important to validate patients' concerns, because we shouldn't dismiss them, because this can really impact in terms of the adherence and the control of the disease. So we should personalize the counseling according to the concerns that
that are being conveyed to us in our interaction. But in any case, the final message would be that any evolution in terms of the devices that are being that are substituting the previous ones will be closely monitored to guarantee that treatment remains effective, and of course to reiterate that the community pharmacist and the whole multidisciplinary team will be available for any additional concerns or any doubts that the patient may have when using the new inhaler.
Thank you so very much. A very wise answer, I would say. And of course, the inhaler technique is really, really important. And I'm also very happy now that we can see this service from pharmacists being implemented in a large number of countries and remunerated by the national health system. I think this is a very positive step forward in this area. Also, we have a question. If you can perhaps send it into the chat box, Job, where can people find the TAI Toolkit? So they can check where it's available and in what languages as well.
It's available in many languages already from www.taitest.com. I've put it in the chat.
Excellent.
And it's also in one of the answers I gave to one of our Indonesian participants. So this is the TAI test, the TAI Toolkit. We are currently translating. It's only available in English and in Dutch at the moment. But we are working now with a new project on making more translations available. But that will take a little bit more time. But the TAI test is available in around 20 languages: Spanish, English, or the TAI itself, Spanish, English, German, French, Italian, Dutch, Russian, Greek, Polish, Bulgarian, Portuguese, Turkish, Arabic, Mandarin, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, at least. These are some of them, I think.
Yeah, a global outreach. That sounds very good. But while you are speaking, I have a question for you. And it's possible that you already answered it in the Q&A box, but should more patients become encouraged to use spacer devices to help with the poor technique?
Yes, this is a very good question. I noticed in the chats as well. Yes, I would always in the Netherlands, we as pharmacists, we always recommend using a spacer with the pMDI. So if you have them available, I would recommend them. Definitely, it helps with the inhaler technique. The problem with the spacer, it can be a bit bulky, and not all the patients take them with them. So at least for home administration, it can be used. But we now also have more compact spacers available, and people can take them on the go. They will fit in your handbag, let's say. But yeah, if you have them, I would always recommend them as a pharmacist.
Excellent. Raviot, linked to this, what recommendations can pharmacists provide to physicians and patients regarding the transition from metered-dosed inhalers to dry powder inhalers, particularly in relation to the higher costs and the presence of propellants in MDIs?
So I think it's about looking at what's clinically appropriate for the patient, because again, it's that framing it with the patient, so the shared decision making, so exploring that with the patient. So there's quite a nice model that we use here called the BRAN model, so benefits, risks, alternative, nothing. So you talk through what the options are, I think, and then allow the patient to choose. And obviously if you've got placebos there to help them make that decision, it's also matching their inspiratory effort to what the requirement is for that inhaler. So most people's natural inhalation is going to be fast, and many of them then don't suit using a pMDI. So it's kind of framing it like that. But I think there has been a challenge, and we've certainly had that in pockets of the UK where people are, areas of the country are trying to switch over inhalers as well. So I think having clear guidelines and supporting resources is important, but also that follow-up. So if you are changing a patient to an inhaler of a different type, whether it's a lower global warming potential MDI or a DPI, you need to have that follow-up in place to make sure that patient hasn't been destabilized, to just check that they're getting on. I think it's also just, again, engaging with open questions. So it's the education for our healthcare staff, but also our patients, but in a dynamic, open way, so that, that we're able to elicit the concerns that sometimes may not come through. So I think there's a number of things there, but it's linking it all to holistic health. So actually stopping smoking and what else is going on. And, you know, so all of that, so that the patient's health overall, they don't feel that they're being done to. They want to be part of that conversation and that change, so that they're more likely to adhere.
Yes, and we know that from the beginning, the new medicine services originated from UK, and it's now followed up by similar services in many countries, and also remunerated from the national health system. Do you have this specific service also for people with respiratory diseases and using these kind of inhalers?
Yeah, there are more incentivized schemes now in primary care. So actually our community pharmacy colleagues, and I say pharmacy teams because some of them are pharmacy technicians as well as pharmacists, they've got a really important role in that. So some of that may be at the adherence level, looking at the amount of prescriptions. And again, it's educating the patient, but in a kind of dynamic dialogue, so that they're understanding that actually you're having an exacerbation that's going to increase your need for having oral corticosteroids, antibiotics. So there's an AMR and a steroid stewardship as well within this as well. So it's, again, education, but understanding. And it's very difficult if we're not having the resources. So sometimes these policy decisions or recommendations come out and there's no money or other resource help to implement them. So it's about how we find that out and do that within our current capacity, which sometimes can be challenging. But community pharmacy have a key role here as well.
Yeah, so if we as community pharmacists perceive that the patient actually isn't adherent or have problems, he can then be referred to the physician once again for follow-up or more information or whatever it can be.
I think the pharmacy can actually look at that as well. Is it unintentional or intentional and non-adherence, and then try to elicit the factors, you know, what are the practical barriers behind that, so the beliefs around it. So again, we have a key role there, and only if we feel that the patient is destabilized, then it potentially isn't the right therapy, then yes, involve the physicians. But I think it's about using our skills. Some of us are prescribers in community pharmacy as well. So what can we do? How can we gain that trust and build it? Because sometimes that care is disparate and you're waiting for a letter to come from the hospital or an appointment to go there. So that can be a long gap between when the patient is seen. So ultimately, that primary care role is so key, because that's closer to their home, and it's developing that trust, I think.
Yeah, if I may add to that, Lars, we actually, and I know in the UK it's also happening in some places, we as pharmacists, we already do like pheno testing at the point of care in the pharmacy. So we test the inflammation in the lungs using the pheno test, the fractional exhaled nitric oxide, to see whether they need more inhaled corticosteroids and whether they are adherent to the steroids. And this, we communicate this to the patient and also to their GP if needed. So a pharmacist can do a lot by themselves nowadays, using also the TAI we use. So the test of adherence to inhalers gives you a very structured overview of the adherence problems. So yeah, I fully agree. We can do a lot by ourselves nowadays, working in teams still.
Yeah, of course, collaboration between healthcare professionals is key for the future as well. Emma, linked to this, in your experience, what are the main challenges pharmacists face when we need to educate patients about new inhaler techniques, and how can these be overcome? I think you are muted.
Sorry about that. Yes, well, I think that overall we are all a little bit reluctant to change. So it is important to, and this is particularly important, for instance, for people who have adapted to the inhaler device and feel confident with that inhaler device. So they will most likely be more resistant to change. That might be a barrier. Another one is the variability of the inhaler technique as such, and also different levels of literacy, and we have to adapt our language, and we have to adapt the message if we want to be effective when communicating with people that can have very different levels of literacy and understanding about the disease and the inhaler itself. So to overcome these barriers, I think that the pharmacists should definitely invest time in terms of understanding what are not only the patient's needs, but also their preferences and expectations about treatment, so we can personalize the message that we are conveying. Like I've mentioned, the inhaler technique demonstration is very important in this respect, and I would like to highlight the importance of retraining over time, because even if the person has had a successful demonstration of how they use the inhaler device, after a few months, they might be already overlooking some of the right steps. So we have to constantly check and recheck. So this is important that we do that. And one thing that I think is most important is that we align the terminology and the messages across the whole multidisciplinary team, because we don't want the patient to have problems with trusting the system, and he will trust more the system if he acknowledges, or he or she acknowledges, that all the healthcare professionals are aligned in terms of the terminology that they use and the messages that they convey. So I think it's also about not only focusing on the confidence about the effectiveness and the safety of new devices, but also in terms of the disease control that will result from the use of that device. Also the technical aspects regarding the inhaler technique, and most of all, the focus on a multidisciplinary effort to ensure that the patient is comfortable using the inhaler device, and that he understands that at any point of his health journey, he can talk to one of the healthcare professionals and expose his doubts and get transversal advice from the different healthcare professionals that are part of the multidisciplinary team.
Excellent, thank you. And also I think that the implementation of new technologies leading to personalized digital assisted education is a tool where we also can use GPTs to translate our message into the language of a person that has some language barriers in the country where they are living. So technology will also be an enabler in this perspective.
Yes, let me just highlight what Job was also saying in terms of us having not only different equipments nowadays in pharmacies, but also these different tools that we can use. Sometimes for certain people, it is more objective if we show a result of a test, or after doing a certain assessment, so that definitely that's an opportunity for community pharmacists also to use the results of those tests or those devices determinations to feed on the message that we want to convey in terms of the disease control and the use of the inhaler, and how the use of the inhaler and the correct inhaler technique is so important in terms of ensuring good patient outcomes.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, I agree with you. Anna, we have some questions here about recycling programs. Are they limited to specialized pulmonary hospitals, or do you have experience if these initiatives also have been adopted by general hospitals or by community pharmacies if there is a program? And also, we have another second question. While the safe disposal of expired pharmaceutical products are most probably expected to being handled in the most professional manner in developed countries, how far is the handling of other environmental pollutants like auto packaging of pharmaceutical products being handled by these same developed countries? And if we can share that or transfer it to less developed countries, what's your experience?
Well, actually, my experience is not very high on that field. Regarding the first one, I already read it on the chat. I don't really know. I know the Portuguese reality, and perhaps Emma can add something more with more information on that, because I'm in the academy and I don't really know precisely on these programs, but I'm sure it is not particularly focused on pulmonary hospitals, because we don't have in Portugal that. We have general hospitals, so if there are protocols, they will be implemented as a whole, I imagine. But specifically, I'm not aware of any specific program for at least existing in Portugal, specific program for the collection of these inhalers. What we do in Portugal, and I know that Emma will confirm that, is that we ask all the people to come back with their inhalers, as well as any other devices that they use of medication, to go back into the pharmacy so that the disposal can be the best possible. Anyway, in my opinion, the best possible is not the good one yet, because we really need to work on this recycling programs, and I believe that we don't have that in Portugal. I hope Emma will add something on that. Regarding the second question on the developed countries, I honestly don't have any data regarding that I can have. I'm sorry for that.
Okay, thank you. Emma?
So in Portugal, we actually have a program that is an integrated program that involves the pharmaceutical industry, pharmaceutical wholesalers, and community pharmacies. Like Anna rightfully said, this is called ValorMed, and people are instructed to bring their expired medication and out-of-use medication and any devices that are no longer being used to the pharmacy to be collected. And those devices, they are collected in a bin, a green bin, and the wholesaler comes to the pharmacy, they pick up the waste medication, and they bring it up to a place where there is separation on materials that can be recycled and materials that have to be incinerated, and that has to do with on whether it is packages or it's blisters or it's devices, etc. We have had this program for a number of years. There are a lot of campaigns informing the population that this program is available, and it is all being paid for by the pharmaceutical industry, because the legislation says that it is the producer of the waste that has the financial responsibility to treat the waste that is generated. So this whole system is financed by the pharmaceutical industry. But as I was saying, that we have had this for a number of years, but we are still we still have a long way to go in terms of the percentage that we are actually able to collect, which we monitor every year, and we still do not reach the 20% of the waste that we know is generated. We do a lot of campaigns in order to increase that percentage, because we also have national objectives based on indicators that we should comply with to continue having this license to collect the waste and treat the waste. But it is a system that has been working for some time now, and all the agents in the supply chain are involved.
Thank you, Emma. Yes, we have the same, more or less the same system in Sweden as well, but for 3 or 4 decades. So this could perhaps be another topic for a digital event, how to recycle products, etc. I think it's time to wrap up. And first of all, I would like to thank all our excellent speakers, our experts, for sharing their insights, expertise, and experience and wisdom. And as we close today's discussion, I think we can see that the introduction of the new or next generation pMDIs represents far more than a technical change. It's an opportunity to align patient care with environmental responsibility. And these innovations also allow us to preserve what matters most: proven efficacy, safety, and patient confidence, while significantly reducing our environmental footprint. And this topic is really vital because it unites patient care, environmental responsibility, and professional leadership. So transitioning to the next generation pMDIs allows us to maintain effective familiar treatment while drastically reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And in this perspective, I think that pharmacists play a key role in guiding patients through this change, ensuring safety, adherence, and trust as healthcare evolves toward a more sustainable future. So actually, our role transforms reformulation into real-world benefit. And thank you for your commitment to people-centered care and to a more, I would say, more sustainable future in respiratory health. And together we can make every inhaler and every conversation count for both patients and the planet. Next slide, please. I would also like to highlight some FIP resources, which include chronic respiratory diseases, a handbook for pharmacists, and the chronic respiratory diseases knowledge and skills guides. These resources outline the knowledge and the skills pharmacists require to develop effective services for chronic respiratory diseases, and you can find them on the NCD microsite. Scanning the QR code on this slide will lead you to the microsite. Next slide, please. Well, this recording of this episode will be made available on fip.org. Please provide your feedback to webinars@fip.org so we can continue to improve the digital event offerings. And also visit events.fip.org for all future events. Next slide, please. And before we end the session, let me just tell you that next year's FIP Congress will be hosted in Montreal, Canada, under the theme of One Health, One Pharmacy, Bridging Science, Practice and Education. And the Congress will be supported by the Canadian Pharmacists Association. So please reserve the dates already, August 30 to September 2nd, 2026. And we have some sub-themes for the Congress: integrated health, pharmacy advancing well-being through a One Health approach, innovating with purpose, driving change through science, education, and practice, and finally, collaborating for equity, strengthening global impact through partnerships and inclusion. And please also look at the deadlines on the screen. We look really forward to your contributions. And once again, a huge thank you to all our speakers and panelists for joining us today, for sharing your expertise, experience, and wisdom. This has been a most interesting event. And thank you to all of you, more than 3,100 participants worldwide who have been attending the session today. And thank you to all the FIP staff involved for excellent collaboration and logistic support. Thank you so very much.